Forget tequila and mezcal. There's a third Mexican spirit that's been getting a ton of press here in the United States over the past few years. It was illegal throughout much of the 20th century, and though it is starting to make some waves, it's still subject to a fair share of misrepresentation. Some people call it the little cousin of tequila, other people say it's a mishmash between mezcal and maybe a gin. Today, we're talking about Sotol. It's hard to know where to start with Sotol, so I think maybe we'll begin with the basics. Sotol is a centuries-old Mexican spirit produced in the northern Mexican states of Coahuila, Durango, and most famously Chihuahua, which produces most of the commercially available brands that we'd be able to find on liquor stores in the United States. The biggest of those being Hacienda de Chihuahua, which has more or less single-handedly championed the category for a lot of consumers here. Now, the spirit is distilled from a plant called desert spoon, which almost looks like a big cluster of hair sprouting in every direction. Contrary to popular misconception, it is not a type of agave, but technically part of the asparagus family. At a certain point in its lifespan, it shoots up a flowering stalk called a quillote, which I think can grow anywhere between 8 to 10 feet tall. Production methods can vary pretty widely, but generally sotoleros use a lot of the same techniques that you'd find in mezcal. We're talking underground volcanic pits, chopped by axe, fermented in wooden vats, and more often than not distilled in clay pots. Now, at first sip, it's easy to understand how the spirit is often confused for a type of agave spirit, right? It's got a lot of those vegetal notes, a lot of that kind of crunchy greenery that you often find in mezcal and tequila, but the profile ends up leaning a little brighter, a little grassier, and sometimes a little bit more botanical forward. Dare I say like a gin, though others might disagree. Today we're going to be trying a bottle of Señor Sotol Ancestral, a new bottling to me that I've fallen in love with ever since I tried it last week. Best of all, for a degenerate like me, it's bottled at 51.4% ABV, which is gotta be the highest I've ever tried from the Sotol. I get some yeast, smoked wood, and a little bit of green grape sweetness that evens it all out with a nice touch. Yeah, and it tastes just like it on the palate too. It's surprisingly sweet, but also still funky and a little bit mineral forward. I get some corn, apple slices, barnyard, hay type of vibes, maybe some lemon zest and pine needles too. It's hard to place a finger on a lot of the things going on here, but it's powerful, right? It feels as if you grabbed some soil from Chihuahua or Durango and you really sprinkled it right into the bottle. Now, interestingly, Sotol was illegal in Mexico between 1944 and 1994, and the reasons for that will vary quite a bit depending on who you ask. I've heard different versions of the story. I think the commonly agreed understanding is that the spirit was associated with rural country folk who were based outside a lot of the big cities, and the government just had a bad idea of who was drinking Sotol for all the wrong reasons. It was legalized in 1994, brands started producing on slightly larger scales, and then in the early 2000s we began to see brands export here in the United States. Still, a lot of people didn't hear about it for a good decade or two. It was around 2017, 2018 when the big tequila boom happened here that mezcal started to get some popularity, and then a little bit after, Sotol started riding those coattails as well. It's a story as old as time for Mexican spirits, and now, kind of inevitably, we're beginning to see celebrities get in on the game. The first celebrity-backed Sotol brand that I know of was backed by Lenny Kravitz, who launched a brand called Noche Luna with French spirits giant Pernod Ricard. This bottle launched a couple of years back, but I've never seen it in the wild, nor have I talked to anyone who's tried it. I'm not sure what the story is there, but I'm curious in finding it, and if you've ever tried it, I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say about it. Lenny Kravitz seems like a cool guy, and I would hope he has a cool Sotol to boot, but I don't know for sure just yet. Now, the second, and so far only other celebrity-backed Sotol brands that I know of is actually backed by Matthew Lillard, the actor who you probably know from Scooby-Doo, Scream, and most recently Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, Lillard is a self-professed nerd, and a few years back he launched a Dungeons & Dragons themed whiskey brand with different blended bourbons themed after different D&D classes. There was a mage, a paladin, a dragon. It was a fun idea, and he recently expanded upon the concept with Macabre Spirits, a horror-themed spirits imprint that kicked off with a barrel-aged Sotol. This is the first and so far only release from Macabre Spirits, so it's hard to say where the series will go from here, but what I do know is that this first bottle, which dropped maybe half a year ago, was accompanied by a short novella written by Mike Flanagan, who is best known for his Netflix shows including Midnight Mass and The Fall of the House of Usher. The back of the bottle reads, "Darkness calls you. Fear is your elixir. Indulge your deepest desires with a barrel-aged spirit so terrifyingly good, the devil himself nods and picks up his bow. Time to dance." The other big thing of note is that this is not distilled in Mexico, but rather in Texas. Though Sotol does have a protected designation of origin in 3 Mexican states, the United States has yet to recognize it like it has for tequila and mezcal. So technically, there are American brands making Sotol the way that a lot of the brands in Mexico currently are. It's a touchy subject for distillers on both sides of the border, but for the time being, it means we get to get kind of off-kilter stuff like this. Now, the brand didn't say how long this was aged in barrels, but it looks pretty dark. I think by tequila standards for an añejo, that looks like it was maybe 1 or 2 years, so it's always hard to say with different climates. It's got an odd aroma, not in a bad way, but definitely in an unusual way. You have a lot of the caramel, baking spice sweetness that you'd expect from, say, a bourbon, and then there's this hint of eucalyptus or chamomile sort of lingering underneath. It's a push and pull between 2 very different vibes that maybe shouldn't work on paper, but it comes together nicely here. Yeah, and it tastes the part too. It's like a big ol' wallop of mint and caramel. I'm struggling to think of what a mint and caramel dessert would be, but whatever that is, it tastes just like that. There's some blood orange sweetness, some herby notes that I'd liken to fennel seeds and maybe oregano, and then overall, especially on the finish, you get a bit of this cooling menthol bite. It brings back a lot of those mint notes that you kind of smell and you taste and you imbibe from front to end. I don't think it's totally representative of what you'd find in a lot of Sotol bottlings currently available on the market, but I think that's partly the point. Brands are experimenting in a lot of different directions right now, and it's hard to nail down a single flavor profile that Sotol is running with. If you're looking for brands to try for yourself, I would highly recommend Señor Sotol. I would also check out Acrónimo. It's a new-ish brand based in Chihuahua that does a Sotol and a Sotol finished gin that has this really strong cardamom note that I've never quite tasted in any other spirit. It's got a really pretty bottle to boot, and the people that run the company are incredibly nice. I'd also recommend Casalotos, which hit the American market in February of last year. Their master distiller, Gerardo Ruelas, truly knows his craft, and I sat down with him last week and asked him a ton of questions about everything Sotol that really helped inform what I understand about the category today. Their flagship Blanco really concisely boils down a lot of the flavors you can expect from other Sotol bottlings, and I'd highly recommend it to anybody who's starting to get their footing with the spirit. A few brands I haven't had the opportunity to try yet include Flor de Desierto, Sotol Uno, and Riablo, though I've heard good things about all of them. If you have any recommendations, be sure to drop them in the comments below because I am always interested in tasting more. My name is Pedro Wolf, and this is the Tequila Pour. Be sure to like and follow along if you're interested in hearing more about Mexican spirits, whether or not they're made with agave.